So, I wanted to talk to you guys and sort of have a heart-to-heart. So, for any of you who are thinking of having kids, let me first of all say that I think that's fantastic. I think kids can be God's little gift. And I think a kid can be an extension of yourself, which is very important to a lot of parents. However, enter the problem of this. You have this idea of how your kid is going to be. And if your kid's not that idea, then what will you do? So let's say you grow up and your kid has ODD, which is just pretty much they're being a vindictive little shit, right? They might do something. I saw this Reddit story recently where this kid decided he would spit on the neighbor's doorknob, and his reasoning was just to get them sick. What happens if you have a little monster? I mean, really. You might think, I'll have parents or something that will help raise that. Okay. They might raise it, right? You might have your own parents, and they might agree. Kid gets grandparents. The problem is, how difficult is that kid going to be? Because we have this fantasy and this image of what the kid is going to be like. And if the kid isn't like that, are you absolutely certain that they're going to raise that? Especially because they're older. They've already went through and raised kids once. So their idea of how the kid is going to be again is just bound to happen. A lot of couples sometimes will do this thing where if the relationship is failing, then they'll think, I'll just have a fucking kid. It'll bring us closer together. They tend to read these fantasy stories about how it's going to be awesome and I'm going to be a completely different dad and I'm going to be more nurturing and loving and we're going to be smiling and we'll go out on picnics and I'll get to see them grow up, hang out with other kids, graduate, they'll get a good job, and I'll be so proud of them. The only issue, of course, being, again, if your kid is a little shit, then there comes a lot of other issues. For example, what happens if you do everything you can, and I mean everything you can. You go get them therapy. You read hundreds of books. You do everything you can. Give them a good environment to succeed in. If they need, they get a special education class. Maybe you enroll them in to some extracurricular activities. It could be football or wrestling. Something that will help take out their aggression, anger, and rage. And yet, unfortunately, none of that works. What do you do then? Now, I'm not trying to scare you guys. I just want you to consider the severity and responsibility of having a kid. You also have to factor in the financial cost. It is extremely expensive. It will cost you tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you're hoping that, yes, psychologically, your kid comes out fine. Now let me ask you a question. What happens if your kid has a chronic condition that requires constant maintenance and really, really damn good health insurance? But even then, the United States has some pretty damn shitty health insurance. So you're going to be paying out the fucking ass. So you better hope that you have a career. However, the idea of one parent working is pretty much all but gone for most people. You are likely going to have to both work, especially now that you have a kid to take care of. But then the issue is, who raises the kid? So the kid has no parents to raise them, so they grow up with a fucked up attachment style, and they ask, does mommy and daddy love me? Because they're not around for when it matters most. And they're a kid. They're not necessarily going to understand all the reasoning and nuance of why you can't be at the house. Kids are naturally very selfish when they're young. And so the kid's going to be asking you, why? And it doesn't matter the reason why. You can sit there and try to rationalize it. But your job as a parent, first and foremost, is to be there for the kid, is to raise the kid. So what's going to happen when the kid says, "Hey mommy, hey daddy, I hate you. I want to go over to Nana's house. I don't want to be here anymore." What's going to happen then? So sometimes what you see is kids who don't get attention, they start acting out at school because they don't care about good or bad attention. They just want attention. And they're able to get that attention from you because you react, you go to the school and you say, "What the fuck?" And this is the first time that dad's paid attention to the kid now. So the kid starts to learn, okay, well, this is at least how I get dad's attention. Of course it's not right. The kid just wants to be loved. The kid doesn't know how to explain that in a manner that makes sense, especially they're not going to because you haven't been raising them. So he acts out, you give him attention, and he finds out and he figures out, I'm going to do that again. I'm going to do that again. So then you're sitting there saying, well, what the hell is wrong with you? Why can't you just behave? But you're still giving the kid attention. And maybe you take them out to McDonald's after you calm down or something. So there's a nice little treat and the kid goes, okay, well, even though that was all very stressful and I didn't like that, I still ended up with quality time with my dad and we got some McDonald's afterward. We had a heartfelt talk, which felt nice, and I really felt the love there because they showed up. I felt the love because they showed up. And you might think, well, I'll just talk to work. I'll just tell my job, hey, I've got a kid. I've got to be with this kid. I've got to love this kid. And they say, work obligations. You agreed to a schedule. You're going to follow that schedule. So now you got some tension between you and your boss. You cut back hours because you think you'll spend more time with the kid. And now you've got another issue instead. You've got money problems. So already your job's on the line. Your employer's actively probably in the background looking to replace you. You got less money and your wife and you are stressing over bills now. You can't go on dates or anything either, as if you could in the first place, but now especially not. Can't afford to pay the nanny. So who's going to watch the kid? It's going to be one of you. At least partially. So you're going to get less and less alone time with one another. Even though the whole point of taking off the job was to spend more time with the family. So, what happens next? Well, the sex drives down, starts dying off, and the wife goes, "Do you not love me anymore? Do you not find me attractive?" Okay, apologies about that. I had a Discord call. So let me get back to addressing that. So where was I at? Sorry for the coughing as well. COVID has been fucking me up. So yeah, the question, right. So what happens is we were talking about this idea of how good a child is. And so the wife and you don't get any free time, right? Because you had that kid and you thought, this will be perfect. This will fix our marriage. And the wife goes, my husband isn't touching me anymore. We ain't got money to pay for anything. We're already struggling, and now the kid's expensive as fuck. And what do you think? You're going to take him to therapy? Do you not have any idea how expensive therapy actually is, okay? Let me tell you something, okay? If you're a therapist, it's good fucking money, okay? It's some good motherfucking money. You make some money off fools, okay? You make some money. And then for good reason. Because you have to study for fucking years. And then you have to constantly keep studying. You have to constantly keep studying. Constantly. But as a client, affordable therapy is extremely hard to find. And quality therapy is also hard to find. So you can bounce from therapist to therapist until you find the right one. Because there's so many different approaches. The most common one that's usually done is something like cognitive behavioral therapy. But that's not the only one. And even that's not going to necessarily work. So what do? You think, I'll put my child through therapy. But the problem with therapy is the only way it's going to be effective is if the person themselves are working with it. Okay? That's the biggest issue. Let me state that again. The only way therapy is going to be useful is if somebody is working with it. They have to be willing to do it. So, eventually, worst case scenario, what I've unfortunately seen is child doesn't get any better. And there's multiple reasons, right? One of the biggest reasons, though, is the child goes to therapy, and it's not the child who's always the problem. Sometimes the child is a little bastard. If they have ODD, you're in for a fucking trip, okay? I am telling you right now, you're in for a trip. You better buckle the fuck up. You are being taken for a fucking ride, okay? But sometimes it's mommy and daddy, because they're sitting at home, they're stressed over finances, and they're arguing with each other because they can't pay bills. And you know what? It's not just about paying bills, living bare minimum. As a couple, you've got to do nice shit. So when couples are struggling, sometimes what happens is they sit in the house all day. They don't do anything because they can't do anything. So there's no more sweet romantic dinner dates. There's no more movie nights. And then because there's no more of that romancing, the sex kind of dies out too. And so now you mix that in a combination of no movie nights, no dinner, no sex, and you can't have sex even if you felt like it because your kid's bugging you up your goddamn ass all fucking day, waking you up at different times of the hour. So then you mix that in. Now you're sleep deprived. You're pretty pissed off about it. That messes with your blood pressure and your heart rate. Sleep deprivation is one of the biggest killers in America. So what do? Well, you start arguing in front of the kid. And kid grows up, starts seeing how mommy and daddy behaved, learns that that's acceptable behavior. Because a kid will model what their parents teach them. That is the role of the parent. Whether or not they accept that role, that is their role. And a kid will develop and act around their environment. Their environments will influence them. So even if the kid goes to therapy, sometimes the issue can be the background, right? So if I was to say, let's say I treated somebody for drug addiction, okay? Let's just pull out a hypothetical scenario, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if, let's say, I give them the best therapy and they get all the resources they need. If when they go home, they're around a bunch of drug addict bums and they're in a super depressing environment where everybody hates each other and nobody gets along. Of course they're going to do drugs. Of course they're going to do drugs. For different reasons. It could be that they're trying to escape from the situation, or that they're feeling stressed, or that it feels like a warm... I've had it described to me as being like a warm embrace, or like a warm kiss. Like, almost feels like the love that's missing, with stuff like heroin, for example. So, all that to say, it's the same that applies to kids, if not more so. The kid is not going to get significantly better. There's still room for improvement. It's not completely pointless. But it's going to be damn hard because you only get, what, a couple hours at most with them a week to sort of help them out. Unless it's like some really intensive therapy, right? Like a partial hospitalization program or some shit like that. You only are going to get even then, the majority of the time and the majority of the influence they're going to get is usually going to come from the parents. And that's also if the parents even allow it in the first place, right? Because if the parents have something to hide and they scare their child into shutting the fuck up, there might be some shit that this kid really wants to talk about, but he's scared about what mommy and daddy will do. So, even if you know it's the parents who are the fault, the problem is, how do you even say that to the parents? And then are they even going to listen to you? So, you're arguing, you're fighting, your kid's getting in trouble at school, and worst case scenario, kid gets taken away from you, foster care comes in, lose your child, and now you feel like fuck up loser failure parents. You feel like a loser parent, a loser partner. And your friends and family all looking at you like you're a son of a bitch, and you very well might be one. And you very well might deserve the criticism. That doesn't change how bad it hurts, though. And it can hurt very bad. So either you or your wife or both, they might go because there's no more spark in the relationship. You're not going on date nights. You're not fucking. You lost your family. You're arguing. You might go and fuck somebody else who might make you feel better. Might let you escape from it. Might give you what you're missing. Whatever that might be. And then, so now you're hiding that. You're gone at all hours of the day. Wondering where the hell each other is. And you grow more and more distant apart. Until eventually, either you reconcile, and in best case scenario, right, you reconcile. But we're not talking about that. I'm talking about the dangers right now and what you need to look out for. And so, of course, the answer might be, that's incredibly paranoid of you. Right. Everybody says never me until it's them. Let me repeat that. Everybody says never me until it's them. Okay? So it's not paranoid of me. I'm not being negative. And sometimes, and to have the nerve to even say that, right, is a little irritating. Because it's what I see with a lot of people. Okay? It sucks. Now, a lot of people are happy, too. A lot of people are happy. We're not talking about that right now. We're talking about the fact that a lot of adults don't even know how to take care of themselves. They can't even manage their own relationships, and they can't even manage their own self. They don't even have their own shit together. Like, they're still struggling with mental illness. Okay? I'm sure we can agree with that. A lot of adults are still trying to figure themselves out, and they're still kind of a mess one way or another. And yet they're going to try to raise a kid? You can't even raise yourself properly. How the fuck you figure you're going to raise a kid properly? So people don't always rise to the occasion. They fall to what they know. In times of panic, they're going to revert to what's most familiar. Because that's the easiest thing to do, and that's the quickest thing to do. And if those coping mechanisms aren't good, then dear God, it's going to get even worse. It's going to avalanche. And it's usually not that it's one big thing that causes a family unit to fall apart. It's usually that it's a snowball of very small things that kind of go unaddressed. And they're not properly dealt with, and they fester. And then it becomes something like, I have a lot of resentment. I don't know when it got this bad, but I know that it hasn't just happened all of a sudden. It's been building for multiple months, and even if I wanted to put in the effort and work on it, I don't know where I'd even begin. And that is very difficult to say to your partner, but not just say to your partner, to work on your partner. Because again, even if you know how to go about it, it might be already too late. It might not even be worth the effort. So, all that to say, when you're having a kid, you need to be careful. Because a lot of shit can go wrong. And as well, I believe in the idea that it can always get worse. If you are a man and you go and get divorced, you are probably going to get fucked. Even if you have a prenup, they might say something like, oh, I was under duress, even if they're not. I'm not saying that that's common, because I don't believe it's common. But I don't know. It's not impossible. I'm just saying, dude. And so, let's say you don't get a prenup, right? Worst case scenario. Because that's the subject today. We're just saying worst case scenarios. Because we talk about... I like to sit on this channel. We like to talk about a lot of positive stuff, which is great. But I think it's important to sometimes talk about these things, not because I want to necessarily, but because I need to. Because people need to be aware that it's not all rainbows and sunshine. Like, I love sitting on here with you guys, and we goof and we laugh, and, you know, I like all the comments I get and responding to those. It's really fucking awesome. And it's been, and you know, seeing the channel grow recently has really made me happy. But it's not all perfect. It's not this Disney picture that that people paint in this world where everything is fine all the time. That shit, to get that, takes a lot of work and constant maintenance. It's like you have a room, right? And you don't try to dirty it up, but you don't try to clean it. And inevitably, due to the law of entropy, it's going to get messier on its own. So you have to constantly maintain and work on things, because if you don't, then the only way it can go is downhill. So what happens? You end up divorced, and now you feel like damaged goods. You lose half your shit. You might lose some of your assets. Things that are really important to you. Your house. Everything. And if you formed a close connection with her family, that might be a particularly hard thing to let go of as well, because you might get close to her family and miss them, or maybe pets, or again your child. So anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and end it here. Appreciate you guys always listening to these videos, and I think that's it, right? I think I addressed everything. Yeah, good. Okay, cool. All right, thanks, guys. Later. I think that's it. I think that's it. If I can think of anything else, I'll add it at the end. All right, later, guys.